All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Groove Swing Speaks. We come to you each and every Tuesday on this network on Studio W The Buzz, and you can reach us a host of ways. First of all, Facebook Live. We're on LinkedIn. We're also on a YouTube. Also, our app. You can go to the Apple App Store and download Studio W. That's Studio W, STUDIO W. Yes, check us out there. Did I mention LinkedIn? I think I did. Also, the website, studiow.buzz, 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 and Alexa. And welcome everyone to Groove Swing Speaks. I hope our panel will be joining us. But anyway, the show goes on. We have a very special guest with us tonight. And let me just read you just a little bit about this young, outstanding gentleman has to offer. Uh, let's see. Greer Arthur Webb is a dedicated warrior for justice who cares deeply about bridging North Carolina's racial divide. A native of Raleigh, North Carolina, and a man of strong faith. Greer is a rising third year Woodruff Fellow at Emory University School of Law. Greer is a graduate of UNC Chapel Hill, where he was a Moorhead Kane Scholar. He has been recognized state and nationwide for his advocacy efforts because he knows that our diversity as people is what strengthens us. Some of Greer's honors include receiving the Triangle MLK Committee's inaugural John Lewis Student Activist Award and being inducted into the Phi Beta Kappa Academic Honor Society in 2023. In February of 2023, Greer was invited to the White House in Washington, D.C., and the official residence of VP Kamala Harris, where Greer was recognized as one of America's emerging Black leaders. While at UNC Chapel Hill, Greer was a true leader of his peers. He served in executive roles within the Black Student Movement, the BMM, that's the acronym, and student government. Notably, Greer served as a senior advisor at UNC's 100th student body president, UNC's 100th student body president, Lamar Richards. All right. I see a couple of our panelists are joining us right now. Okay. I hear some little background. I think that, hold on. All right. Tanisha, that's on your end. Okay. Turn down your speakers. All right, dear. All right. Let's see. Greer is firmly devoted to service, currently working as senior advisor to Sidekicks Academy Incorporated. Sidekicks Academy is a Durham-based nonprofit that uses Taekwondo to teach elementary school students about character, respect, and justice. Last summer, he worked as a legal intern with the Federal Defender Program in Atlanta. Last fall, Greer served as a student attorney with the Emory Law School's Juveniles Defender Clinic. This summer, he is working as a summer associate at the Atlanta law firm of Parks, Chesson, and Wahlberg. Greer is a proven leader who loves to learn, cherishes collaboration, and is determined to effectuate change. Welcome to the set, Mr. Greer A. Webb.
Thank you, Brother Brian.
Hello,
Glad
sir.
to be here. Good evening.
Man, that is a lot for a young man such as yourself. That is a lot. Now, welcome to the set. Tanisha. Hey, Tanisha.
Hola. Hi, everybody. Hi, Mr. Greer.
And I see,
Hi, Mr. Yeah.
And I see Brother Robert Hicks. Hey, Brother Hicks. How are you, brother?
Very good, very good. And welcome everyone
very
this
good.
evening. And I believe this is episode 73.
Episode 73. Wow. Amazing. 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 Well, we have a gentleman on tonight, Mr. Greer Arthur Webb. And also, he knows someone that we know and love very well. It is our executive producer, that's Rock. And as a matter of fact, she taught him from K to the 5th grade and they never lost contact. She knew at that time he is outstanding, and she knew he would be a rock star. Greer, I'm proud to have you, man, and we're proud to have you in your setting, and we're proud of what you do. There's
Thank
so
you.
much to unravel here. Just tell us a little bit now. You're in your third year of law school, and I want to find out what motivated you to go into law in the first place. I'm an advocate and a fan of law. You know, my mom wanted me to be a lawyer, but I didn't do that. I went in another direction. But what motivated you to become or get involved in law?
Well, Brother Brown, first of all, thank you so much for having me this evening. I'm really proud and honored to be with you all. And before I start speaking, I just wanted to note that you were playing that song. I know it's an oldie goldie, but Wake Up Everybody by Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. And I think that's just so poignant in the day and age in which we're living. You know, that last line of the first stanza talks about there's so much hatred, war, and poverty, and we see what's going on around us. And so really that leads me to why I went to law school. And it's because I've always been committed to justice. As Miss Rouse, as I called her, or Rockin' Rouse, as we called her in elementary school, knows well, I love people. I love talking to people, listening to people, learning from people, and really learning their stories. And so for me, law school was just the natural next step for me. So I went right after I attended college at UNC Chapel Hill in North Carolina. And as you noted, Brother Brown, I'm born and raised in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is one of my favorite places. North Carolina is an amazing state. And so had some great mentors. Shout out to my parents. I had great parents and family members who pushed me on to higher ed. And so I ended up down here in Atlanta at Emory University School of Law, where somehow I'm now going into my third and final year. So that's a little bit of my why. And I'm, again, glad to be on the show tonight with you all.
That is really outstanding. Let's talk about your parents a little bit. Are any of them in that profession of law, and are they advocates such as yourself?
They are not. My parents actually met at a bank. My dad was my mom's boss, and now she says it's the other way around. But she being my mother is amazing, and of course would not be here literally without her. And then my father as well has always been a great supporter of mine and a great motivator of me. And so I shout them out as often as I can these days, because I really would not be here without them. Again, those North Carolina roots run deep. My dad grew up in North Carolina. My mom also grew up in North Carolina. I actually went to the same middle and high school as my father in Raleigh, North Carolina. And so he leaves a great legacy that I try to walk in every day. And they're just amazing advocates for what's right, and great leaders in their own right. And so very proud and really humbled to have been raised and continue to be raised by them.
When is the first time, at what age could you say that you really started? Because like you said, I played that song, Wake Up Everybody. That means a lot to me. And I played that especially because I knew that you were going to be on the show, and I knew that you could relate to it. For some reason, I just knew you could, as young as you are. And I think that song came out before you were born, I believe. I believe it did. I don't have any facts on that right now, but I've had it for years. But at what age did you realize that, you know, you really, you didn't like the state of things that was going on? You knew that it could be better, and someone needs to do something to fight for others who can't fight for themselves. At what age did that really come into your being and your thinking that this is what you wanted to do?
Yes, sir. Really from a young age. And this beard may be deceiving, but I'm only 24. That song came out in 1975. So a little bit before my time, but it has been an amazing song that I've grown up listening to. And I just think for one, the song has a great rhythm and a great groove to it. Secondly, to your point, it's still so relevant, and it has to do with the way that we treat one another and the way that we show up in our communities. And going back to my parents, that's something that they instilled in me from a young age, is showing up, being active. And so as far back as I can remember, Brother Brown, I've been active in my community, playing sports, involved in the arts. I'm now passionate about politics and policy, which is one of the reasons I'm in law school now. And so for me, it's just always been about people, especially defending people. You read a bit of my bio there. Last year, I got to defend young people here in the city of Atlanta. I also got to defend adults last year as an intern who had been charged with federal crimes in the Northern District of Georgia, which includes Atlanta. And now I'm working at a law firm where we do plaintiff side litigation. So again, fighting for people who have been wronged in some way. And so to answer your question directly, it goes back as far as I can remember, probably to when I was a toddler. And my parents did a great job of exposing me to diversity, which I think is a strength, and to different things, and allowing me to choose my path.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm gonna toss this over to Tanisha. I have a ton of questions, but I don't want to hog the set. We only have an hour, so Tanisha, what questions do you have for Mr. Greer?
Well, he actually answered my question because I wanted to know if he's actually going to go into politics after he finished up his law degree. So, like, which particular arena are you thinking about focusing on when you do go into politics?
That's a great question. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to look. I do know that I want to represent people in some way. I certainly want to practice the law and make sure that I'm well versed in that before I jump into politics. But I tell people all the time, I'll tell you, Tanisha, and our listeners and viewers, that the root word of politics, POL, actually goes back to the ancient Greek, and it just means of a people or of a citizenry. So when people tell me like, oh, I'm not involved in politics, I don't like politics, you shouldn't go into politics, I always look at them kind of funny. So you don't like people? You don't care about the people around you? You don't want me to care about my community? Let's actually go to the root words. Something that Rockin' Rouse, as I call her, knows well is that my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, was a 20-plus year English teacher in Raleigh, North Carolina. And she always taught me the power of words. And so for me, again, to answer your question directly, I want to go into politics because I want to continue to grow in my knowledge and representation of people. And so what that looks like, is it at the state level? Is it federal? Is it a city council? I'm not sure. I go where God leads. But at the end of the day, I know that people are my passion. And so I want to keep on practicing how I show up for others.
And I have one more question too, William. So you said you did some casework as far as like working with people that are in the federal judicial system, like, you know, that's been convicted felons. So like, what's your conversion rate as far as like finding out the evidence that was actually may have been pinned on them was actually not legitimate evidence to be able to prosecute them and have them be sentenced for 5, 10, 15 years for a small ounce of marijuana or something like that? So what's the conversion rate on that too, as far as like, you know, false information that was actually pinned on these folks?
That's a great question. And, you know, it has to be stated that we're all Black on this call. And so we know that the criminal justice system affects us differently than it does, say, our white brothers and sisters. And so that's something that I really wanted to research and study in law school. I started studying that at UNC Chapel Hill. I double majored in political science, but also Black history. And so I started to learn how these systems have really been set up to disenfranchise the marginalized. Let me back up a little bit and say, before I started law school, I had the opportunity to intern with a personal injury firm down here in Atlanta. Then after that, I was able to intern with the Federal Defender Program. And so that, I think, is what you're talking about, Tanisha. That was last summer now. And I worked here in Atlanta. I was at the federal courthouse almost every day. If I wasn't at the federal courthouse here, I was at the federal prison in Lovejoy, Georgia, about an hour outside of Atlanta. And so what we were doing was, as you said, representing people who had been charged with federal crimes. Now, sometimes they would go on to be convicted, or sometimes they would go on to take a plea deal, which is basically a conviction. And so oftentimes our clients did go to prison. However, there were many times in which we really wanted to advocate for them to not go to prison, right? To maybe get probation, to still be able to be active members of their communities. And then there were some times in which the evidence was not strong against them, or they had the government, that is, may have had evidence on the wrong person, or this person really didn't violate the law. It may have been someone else, or it may have been no one at all. What is important to note, as we see trials like the Diddy trial up in New York, and for those who may have followed at the state level, the YSL trial down here in Atlanta, which involved the famous rapper Young Thug, oftentimes the federal government comes in with some good, hard evidence. It's very hard to get off on a federal charge. On the state level, like we saw in the YSL trial with Young Thug and others, you can get off, or at least you can get out into the community and be on probation. But oftentimes when the federal government brings a case, you're going to pay the price. And so that was unfortunate, because I don't think prison is a great place for anyone. But I do think it is important to understand how race plays a role, how economics play a role in our criminal justice system, how gender plays a role as well. And then moving on to last fall, so about 8 months ago, I guess, I worked at Emory. They have a clinic called the Juvenile Defender Clinic. And so I was able to represent kids in Atlanta at their school hearings. Maybe they did something wrong at school. They were about to be suspended. They're actually allowed to have an attorney or a student attorney, in my case, present. And sometimes they all, kids can still be charged with crimes. And so sometimes we represented them in the criminal justice system, making sure that they got a second chance or sometimes a third chance, because we want to keep kids in school and off the streets. And we don't want them in juvenile detention either. Right. So we do want people to be held accountable, but we also want to make sure that especially young people have, if it takes multiple chances to grow into themselves. And so now I'm on the civil side of things. This summer, I'm working for a labor and employment law firm. So that means people who have been terminated from their jobs and they feel like there was discrimination at play. We represent the people. Sometimes we'll represent the employer. But those are cases that deal with pregnancy discrimination. Oftentimes we see clients who come back to work from maternity leave and then they're immediately fired. We also see some racial discrimination cases where people will make little jabs and jips at people for their race, and then they end up being fired. And so we want to make sure, and then we also deal with cases where people may be working overtime and not being paid for that time. And so again, this all goes back to a common theme of justice, making sure that people have the opportunity to succeed and actually to thrive.
That sounds great. And I was going to ask you one more question, William. I'm sorry. If you were able to implement a law, what law policy would you implement? Like if you were to be able to create your own law, what would you think that you would go into? It seems like, of course, you deal with people that's been underserved in the judicial system. But like if you were able to come and create your own law when you go into politics, what would you actually implement? What type of law?
Let me answer that twofold, and I'll be brief.
Okay.
To go back to one of your points on marijuana. So I will shout out Atlanta, and it may be the state of Georgia. Oftentimes we hear this term, prosecutorial discretion, meaning prosecutors have discretion. They have a choice when it comes to what types of crimes to prosecute. So thankfully, they don't take marijuana too seriously down here, nor do I think they should. Of course, I don't want people to be addicted to drugs, but we often don't see people getting locked up for long periods of time anymore for low-level drug charges, at least here in Atlanta. So that is a positive in my eyes. To answer your question about a law or policy that I would enact if or when I get into the political arena.
There you go.
It would have to do with gun violence prevention, because that's really how I started in the political space. I was 17 when the Parkland school shooting happened down in Florida on Valentine's Day in 2018. And we saw, of course, the school resource officer running away from what was happening. We saw students who lost their lives and others who were injured. And so one of the first things I would do is really push harder for gun violence prevention. We know this disproportionately impacts Black communities, Black and brown communities. And so I want to get these guns off the street. I want to give folks of color and anyone who's feeling violent or feeling like they need to get out some aggression alternatives. And so that's part of what Brother Brown mentioned with Sidekicks Academy, which is a youth character education program in Durham. We teach them Taekwondo, which is a martial art. And so we allow them to express their anger that way instead of turning violent on one another. And so my first law would have to do with gun violence prevention, and a great model, just to give the people something tangible to hold on to. A great model is, and you three may have heard of it before, but it's called red flag laws. And that basically allows family members or members of the community to report some dangerous behavior to a judge, and then a judge can make a decision about whether or not that person should have weapons. I think that's very common sense. And we see oftentimes where, whether it be school shootings or there was a recent church shooting in Michigan, oftentimes these people have a troubled background. And so if someone was able to get to them, maybe give them some therapy, some love, and take their weapons away, at least temporarily, we may be able to prevent some of this death that we see at the hands of guns every year. So that would be my answer to you, Tanisha.
Well, thank you. Impressive and very impressive.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Robert?
Yes, definitely. And Counselor, thank you very much for your advice about your service to the people in the communities that you do serve in. There are not too many of us out there who are in your field, and when you are out there, we feel that it is a blessing in itself. just knowing that you're out there, but also understanding what's going on in the communities that you live in and you serve in. It's not like a person who's an attorney who lives in a completely different outside area from where they actually are supposed to be practicing. So we definitely appreciate that. One of the things I wanted to ask is, you have a long list of service as well as law. When was the bug in your ear that said, I should be out here and be an officer for the people? Because that's what basically a lawyer does.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And let me just tell you, Brother Hicks, that to your point, there are not a lot of us, especially in the criminal defense space, to Tanisha's point, where we're out here going against the government saying, hey, let's make sure this person is given a fair trial. Or if they're convicted, let's make sure they have a fair sentence. We shouldn't just be sending disproportionately Black and brown men to jail for the rest of their lives. We know how hard it is coming out of jail or prison to get a job and to, reset, if you will. I'll also note for the audience, this is something I recently learned. Criminal defense attorneys are the only type of attorneys mentioned in the Constitution. When it talks about everyone having a right to a defense, criminal defense attorneys are the only type of lawyer that are listed in our nation's Constitution. And so when people are out here bashing public defenders or saying, well, why are you defending this person who's accused of murder or accused of trespassing or accused of stealing? It's because everyone deserves a fair trial. And we know, to Tanisha's point, that evidence can be construed against people in improper or illegal ways. And so for me, that's exciting that I get to not just go against the government. I think there are great government jobs and great people out here who work for the government, but to make sure that those who are going to trial, right, that's one of the most maybe upsetting or depressing times of that person's life, that they have an advocate there beside them to make sure the process is fair. Directly to your question, Brother Hicks, I think I answered this question in a kind of roundabout way when I was talking at the beginning with Brother Brown about how I've always been passionate about people. And so when I went to college and I started to gain that knowledge, that's when I knew. I've studied political science and Black history in college. I knew that I wanted to take that a step further. And I guess I'll answer the question in a different way now by saying I have what's called the big three. It's almost an equation for true change, I call it. It starts with education. The second step is protesting or challenging injustice. And the third piece of the equation is policy change, written change. And so we saw, let's use 2020 for an example. After Brother George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis, Minnesota, people started to educate themselves on policing in this country and on racism. And then people protested, some of the largest protests we've seen in this country in our nation's history. But that third piece, policy change, is kind of where we're hung up, right? We haven't passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Bill in Congress. A lot of companies now are just rolling over and giving away their DEI initiatives because certain people say so. And so if we're talking about truly changing our communities, we have to get some written change on the books so that people can, A, be held accountable, but B, folks who may be victims of injustice can point to something and say, hey, no, it's written in your policies. Hey, no, this is a law that's written down on paper that has been passed. It protects me. And so that is really the reason that I'm in law school now, is because I want to make sure that justice is cemented into the law and made concrete in our communities so that people can succeed and, again, thrive.
Yeah, so usually and definitely thank you for that. Usually what people say is justice is blind, but nowadays it's not really all that blind. You usually might have that one eye open over the blindfold is just open on just one eye and the other one's covered. So I think it would be more imperative to make sure that everything is fair, but also everything is factual as well, and not having, because the idea is you have to be able to overcome, you have to have proof, and without proper proof, skewed proofs, basically, that just basically is not going to go in the favor of the defendant or even sometimes the plaintiff in some cases.
That's right. And I would answer that too. And we may get into this a little bit later and say, First of all, yes, you do have to have facts, especially if you're talking about the legal realm. But I like to say you also have to have faith. And so when it comes to diversity, when it comes to justice, when it comes to the law, and a lot of people are hopeless these days. We see the United States interceding in wars across the water. We see DEI being rolled back and college students being deported. A lot of people are hopeless. And so there also has to be an element of faith involved. And to Brother Hicks' point, we can see both facts and faith at play in the law. When you're putting on a trial, yes, you need to have facts on your side, but you also have to get the jury to buy in, right, to your story, to your narrative. And sometimes you have to be a bit dramatic so that they know that they can believe in what you're saying. Give them that little mustard seed of faith to grab onto. I'd also say, and this is what I meant by we may get into it a little later, facts are in dispute these days with the rise of AI, with the person that we have in the White House behind the Resolute desk right now, with other politicians and even just community leaders who are so far down social media rabbit holes that they can't tell you what a fact is. And so it is important that you hold on to facts and that you really have research and support behind those facts. Because it's not enough to just say this is right these days. People are going to challenge you and say, well, how do you know that? Are you sure? The whole Fox News mentality. We're just going to keep saying things over and over again until you believe them. And if you challenge us, we're going to say it's a problem with your source. It's not us. And so that kind of leads me to my final point on this topic, which is you need facts. We need more faith, but people also need to humble themselves and understand that even in this day and age where social media is on the rise and continues to be popular, we don't know everything, right? And none of us are perfect. And so to humble ourselves and to open our ears, to listen to others, open our eyes to read the proof or evidence that others are putting forward becomes vital in a society that's actually challenging the truth.
Outstanding.
Absolutely.
Robert?
That definitely outstanding. Open your ears, open your eyes, open your mind as well.
That's right.
Also, the idea of closed minds, pretty much they're just going to have tunnel vision. And basically the idea is you have to be able to be open to hear other people and not necessarily what your own biases are. So thank you for that.
Sure. I mean, I'll just briefly say something that I have been saying to a lot of people recently. We don't have to agree, but it is important that we try to understand each other. Because if you don't even take the time to understand where I'm coming from, then this is a pointless conversation. However, if you say, Greer, I can understand where you're coming from, or I never thought about that before. I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm just asking you to understand that I'm coming to this conversation on equal footing with you. So I think that's a great point. Having open minds, Brother Hicks, is just as important as open eyes and open ears.
Exactly. Thank you.
And that's outstanding. A couple of things you said, Brother Greer, and that is, you said the importance of words. The importance of words. I want to ask you a question, and especially being in the courtroom. How important is not only what you say, but how you say it and your delivery? How important is that?
Very important. And I would add one to that. When you say it, the timing of your words is also very important. And so knowing when to step up and to speak out is just as important as knowing when to maybe take a step back and use calmer and softer language. And so it's very important that you choose your words carefully because people are listening, especially so that I had to learn this as well. Once I got to law school, the two main avenues for law are litigation, which basically means you're on track to go to court, and then transactional or corporate law. And oftentimes you're more so in an office building, sitting behind a desk, drafting contracts, you still have conversations and interface with clients, but you're not really trying to go to court and be before a judge every day. That's a generalization, but those are the two avenues for the listeners and viewers. And so I'm definitely going down the litigation track right now. I don't mind going to court. I don't mind standing up and speaking out. And so to do that, to your point, Brother Brown, you have to not only have the right words, but you have to use those words in a way that is persuasive, in a way that is convincing, not only to the court, but also to the jury, not only to the jury, but also to your client. You want your client to believe you. You want your client to understand that you are there to support them and you are their advocate. So having the right words is important. which is why it's important to educate ourselves. Using those words at the appropriate time is also important. And then how you use them is important as well. And so again, language and the way we speak to one another, most of us spend our whole days, whether it's on social media, interacting with comments, or actually talking on the phone, which is a lost art, or FaceTiming or Zooming. We're talking to people every day, or at least we're thinking about words at all times. And so if we put more time and effort toward how we use those words that are in all of our brains, I think we could have more compassionate communities and have more success when it comes to things like justice and economic success.
Absolutely. I have a few other questions I have before I toss it back over to Tanisha, but I want to say this to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this right now, please share with your friends. We have a little time. We have a half hour to go. And this is a conversation that you should listen to. You want your friends to listen to it. You can even bring the children in front of the speaker and let them listen to this. This is extremely important. Greer, something you said earlier, you talked about education. I've got to team this up with and also ask you about this. I can picture you as an attorney right now. Matter of fact, I would hire you if I needed an attorney. I would definitely hire you, because what I hear in your delivery and your passion is confidence. I've seen, we've watched our trials on TV all the time, and no matter how factual that attorney is, if he doesn't deliver that properly, using not only the right words, but at the right time, he could lose that jury. He could lose it, even though he might be factual, versus you have this other attorney that comes up that he's confident in what he's saying. He may not even be on point. But what's going to happen? People, and especially that jury, and maybe perhaps the judge should know the law, right? They're going to buy that confident attorney that says, hey, I know what I'm talking about. These are the facts. This is why my client didn't do this. This is why this happened, whatever it is. Let's talk about that confidence, and let's talk about that delivery, and let's talk about how, like you said, having the right words and you're using them at the right time. Confidence. Let's talk about that a little bit, because you seem like you're a very confident young man.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And again, I shout out my teachers, including Rock and Rouse. I shout out my parents and even my grandparents who are still living and who just impart so much wisdom and confidence in me. Let me just talk about some famous attorneys for a second, right? You got Thurgood Marshall, Abraham Lincoln, Johnny Cochran, right? If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. All of these people are compelling, or were compelling speakers who were also passionate about justice. And to your point, Brother Brown, juries are supposed to be juries of your peers, but they're just people, and they could be of diverse ages. And so when it comes to grabbing their attention and holding their attention, you have to be very careful in how you deliver words, right? It's not just standing up there and not being up there for a while and sitting down. It's also the words you use, because you say something in the first 10 seconds of your speech, you might tune a juror out because they're offended. And now you may only go up there and speak for 5 minutes, but you lost them within the first 10 seconds. And so you want to be brief, but you want to be confident as well. You don't want to be offensive. And these are not just tactics or strategies to be used in the courtroom. These are tactics and strategies that anyone who speaks to any audience can use and should use, right? Think about preachers, the power of the Black church in America's justice movement. You don't want to be in church listening to one preacher for an hour, but 20 minutes in the right sermon could be all you need. And I see y'all laughing because we know how it is, especially in the Black church. I'm in there. I'm like, I should have had a snack today if I knew you were going to go this long. It's important to not take up all the time just talking at people. And then that leads me to my next point, which is you want to draw people in. You don't want to just talk at people.
Right.
You want to include them in the conversation. And that's pretty simple, right? We do that every day. Hey, have you ever been in this predicament or this circumstance? Hey, do you like this? Hey, do you remember 10 years ago when this major event happened? You know, I like sports. So does anybody on the jury play tennis, basketball, football? Okay, now we have a connection and now you're tuned in. And so it's timing, it's the words you use, but it's also how you make people feel. And that is what I think, in my limited experience, makes a compelling and charismatic attorney.
Absolutely. Also, I have this question to ask, and because in high school or college, were you ever on a debate team?
Great question.
Have you participated in debate? Yes.
I
Please.
have not technically, I don't think ever been on a debate team. I think my college may have had one or a few. I was in student government, but that's a little different. And then I was not on a mock trial or moot court team in high school. However, when I got to law school and I was able to see all of these opportunities in front of me, I signed up for the moot court team, which is like mock trial. And so I was actually able to go earlier this year to first Nashville, Tennessee, and do some arguments in front of judges. And then secondly, went to New York City, to Manhattan. And we competed in an event where we argued, we debated with an opponent in front of attorneys and judges. That event in New York was actually at New York Law School, not to be confused with NYU Law. And New York Law School's claim to fame, which I realized when I was up there, is that that's where Judge Judy went. And they have her picture plastered all around the school. And so we were there in that spirit, arguing, trying to hold the other party or the other side accountable. And so to that point, I had not participated in any type of model United Nations or mock trial or moot court team. But when I got to law school, I tried immediately to take advantage of those opportunities to perfect my oral advocacy.
Mm-hmm. 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 Let's talk a little bit about voice inflection. And I could see how that could be very, very important if you are an attorney. Voice inflection, instead of monotone, dry, whatever it is, being passionate and being not only that, but not using or raising your voice slightly because you don't want to be too loud. You don't want to turn anyone off. And you also don't want to talk so people think that you're boring. And being able to do that at the right time. How did you develop that skill? Because I can hear it in your delivery tonight that you are very passionate about what you're doing and you are not a monotone speaker. As a matter of fact, I think that if I were to go to one of your lectures, I would be pinned to my seat and leaning forward, listening to you because the passion and your delivery. Let's talk about that a little bit and the importance of that.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Maybe I'll start signing up to do TED Talks or something to make some extra money because I am on that law school budget right now. I think at the end of the day, it comes back to self-confidence for me. I've already mentioned the many and great mentors in my life and my family members who support me, but all of that comes back to that word you used earlier, confidence. Not just generally being confident, but self-confidence. And what I mean by that is when I speak, again, I mentioned being humble, so I'm not saying this in a braggadocious manner. When I speak, I want people to listen. Otherwise, why am I speaking? And I think a lot of people don't have that self-confidence, not through any fault or by any fault of their own, but because they don't have the tools to employ self-confidence. And so when I speak, I use that inflection, maybe somewhat naturally, but also learned because I want people to hear what I'm saying. I want people to feel a certain way when I speak. And I hope that that's an empowering way. I want them to feel empowered. I hope that I encourage people. I hope people feel encouraged when I speak. And so if I just sat here to your point and was monotone, the viewers would be dropping off by the seconds, right? Here we are, Groove Swing Speaks every Tuesday at 7 p.m. You got William Brown on here, Robert Hicks, Tanisha Holmes. But when I talk like this, what's going on, y'all? We are here on Groove Swing Speaks every Tuesday at 7 p.m. talking about justice, talking about culture. We got Brother Hicks on here, Tanisha Holmes in the building, and we got Brother William Brown as the host. This show wouldn't operate without him. Shout out to my former drama teacher, Rockin' Rouse, on the ones and twos, executive producing. I mean, that's much more exciting, right? I feel like and that's something that I just made up on the spot. And again, I don't say that because I'm overconfident. I say that because it matters, right? You want what you say to matter to people, even if you're joking. I tell people all the time, law can be fun, politics can be fun, faith, which is important to me, can be fun. Everything doesn't have to be monotone, but I feel like this world pushes us down that road so often. You got to be basic. You have to be monotone, especially Black folks. Don't draw attention to yourself. Make your family proud. You don't want to embarrass them. You don't want to embarrass yourself. But instead of embarrassing yourself, what if we encourage people to be themselves? What if we encourage people to be proud and confident in their backgrounds, in their experiences? They have goals for the future. Let's encourage them to push those goals and make them bigger instead of just saying, yeah, that's good, stay right there. No, how can we be better? Right. And so at the end of the day, inflection is a small part of that. But I think it's so important that we talk to one another in settings like this, safe spaces where we can encourage one another to be the best version of ourselves. And I know that's a cliche, but that's really true. If we're not getting better every day, if we're not having some fun, if we don't have any faith in the future, then what are we doing day to day? That's how people get sad, right? And even sometimes depressed. And so it's important, speaking of depression, to mention that mental health is key, right? For me, faith is important, but mental health is important as well. Going to therapy and getting those tools from a professional can help you, can help those who are watching and listening. So don't hear me as saying you got to do it all on your own. No, lean into your community. That is people who support you and encourage you, but also lean into these professionals that God has given us to help us. And then also make sure that you are holding on to that faith, even if it's mustard seed sized, because there is so much more, so much good out there for us all to experience.
Absolutely. There are three things that you mentioned earlier, and that was education, protest, and policy. Let's talk about the first thing, education. Would you say, or would you agree that if you are educated, if you know the subject that you're talking about, it's easier, or you can develop that confidence, or you can have confidence if you know what you talk about, instead of going or trying to wing something and not doing your homework or whatever it is. Can you speak on the importance of educating yourself, and how does that tie in into your confidence?
Right. Some people say, I think it was once said, that education is the ultimate leveler of the playing field, right? It's the great equalizer, I believe is the quote. And I think that's true. But if you don't do anything with the knowledge that you're given, then you're going to be a little behind. So it's important to be educated, to gain an education, but it's also important to hold on to that knowledge. And one of the ways that we hold on to knowledge is not only talking about it, but also imparting that knowledge on others, sharing it with others. I remember being in high school in Raleigh in Wake County, North Carolina, having to take pre-calculus. And that was one of my hardest classes ever. I think I got a C in that class, which was one of my lowest grades. And I thought the world was falling. I thought, I don't know what I was going to do. But at the end of the day, one of the ways that I learned that material, the little that I did, was that I talked it out with people, whether that be my parents or my friends. Hey, let me try and explain this to you. Because that would also teach me in turn whether or not I really had a grasp on that material, right? I explained it to someone, and then I sat there and said, okay, is this how the teacher explained it in class, or am I sounding a little bit different? Am I sounding off? Am I confident? How am I feeling when I'm telling you this information? And so gaining knowledge is important, but also maintaining knowledge is important. And one of the ways we maintain knowledge is by sharing that knowledge with others, by reflecting, right? Taking time to either journal or taking time to just be still and think, okay, what have I learned this week? Who have I talked to this week? How did those conversations impact my life? I think, again, in this day and age in which social media is so top of mind, this day and age in which everybody is pushed to be so productive, we don't take time to rest and be still. So we lose a lot of the knowledge that we gain jumping from one thing to the next in this 24-hour news cycle, right? We keep hearing the same things over and over again, and maybe slight variations, but what would it look like for us to take time each week to rest and to reflect on what we've learned and to make up our own minds, right? To Brother Hicks' point, what are the facts that we've learned this week, and how do they relate to my lived experience? And so I think that's why education is so important, because that is your foundation. Education is the foundation for you to protest things. You got to know what you're talking about if you want people to take you seriously in the streets. And education is also the foundation for policy change. When you're putting these words into written policy for companies or corporations, when you're taking words and you're trying to put them together in a way that's persuasive and will allow that policy to get passed in Congress or in your state assembly, you need to know what you're talking about, or people won't vote for it, it won't make sense. And so that's why I think education is that foundational piece, that first variable, if you will, in the equation for true change.
Absolutely. Tanisha?
So, William and Mr. Webb, I think we have found our new predecessors for President Obama, and of course, our current president we have in office right now. To be honest with you, I most definitely will vote for you. All right, yeah, we found the new. Pass the baton over to you.
I was thinking the same.
You too.
I was thinking the same.
I just up here thinking like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to feel, how to act. I'm just, it's beyond been impressive. I mean, this is like it's almost like, am I talking to President Obama when he was 24 years old? That's what I'm thinking. Is that how you feel too, William? I mean,
yes,
just
absolutely.
eloquent with this words, and your delivery is just like above it's just above. It's just
right, absolutely. And Tanisha, this is your time. This is your time. But I was thinking the same thing. Now, okay, perhaps I don't know whether he needs to start with local politics or not, or just jump right into the
Senate. Jump into it. That's what I'm saying. I think so too.
And then run for president. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I lost my words. Let me say this. I know a lot of these positions still have age limits on them, so that withstanding or notwithstanding, I will just take this time to say that young people have always been on the front lines of history, right? Young people have always been the ones pushing the envelope, from the civil rights movement to even the gay rights movement in this country, or the anti-war movement, showing up and saying, hey, there are different ways to think about these issues. And what I tell people often, and sometimes people get offended, but I think this is a safe enough space to share. Young people are really most important in these conversations, because young people are going to be around the longest, right? Young people generally are going to outlive the generations above us. That's just a practical fact. And so it's important that we're included in these conversations so that we don't become 40, 50, 60 years old. And now for the first time, we have input, we have ideas, and it's too late. And so I'm an advocate of getting young people, not just into politics, but into positions of power, into positions of authority, put young people on school boards, have a youth member of your city council, right? Because how can you have these conversations about school and policing and the environment, and you're going to wipe out the generation that's going to be around for the longest amount of time going forward?
Makes sense.
Right? And so I appreciate you all saying that. And again, just have to credit my community with empowering me and giving me this confidence. But I will also say I'm not the only one, right? There are so many young people out here. I even look at this New York mayoral race, if y'all are following that. There's a young man who is progressive and really pushing the envelope. He's been out in the streets every day talking about his policies and his ideas. He's been, on social media, but he's also taking time to sit down with older generations. He went to Al Sharpton's event the other day and said, hey, I'm here to listen. And then if I'll be permitted, I'll share my platform. So they're out there. And I do think that our voices are important.
Yeah, they are. Are you planning on are you going to get your license in Georgia and also North Carolina too? You're going to do a dual bar
That's
exam?
A great question. Yes, that would be my ultimate goal. Georgia's a little unique. There's something called the Uniform Bar Exam.
Uniform. That's right.
We lost students called the UBE, but not every state has bought into that, and Georgia has not. So if I got my law license just in Georgia and then tried to jump a year later to North Carolina and practice law, I wouldn't be able to. However, if I get my law license in North Carolina, for example, and then I want to jump to DC or Illinois or some of the select states that do reciprocity,
reciprocal license. Okay.
So I'll probably do both, but we'll see. Again, we're going to go where God guides, because that's
that's right.
A lot of money.
That's right. Because money's power. Currency makes things happen. I got two more questions, William. Just two more questions. Okay. I was going to mention about there was a public offender that used to go to court in pajamas. Do you remember that guy? I can remember that guy's name. Do you guys know who I'm talking about? That was an excellent defense attorney that would go to court in front of the judges in his pajamas on, and his hair would be all woolly and crazy. But I mean, he would win most of his cases. He was just he knew how to articulate very well, like you, and prove his point and prove the law too as well. That's my question. If y'all don't remember who he is, I can't remember his name. I was going to try to pull it up. So what's your thoughts about getting a license? I mean, I know you're at Emory, but what's your thoughts about the education piece about people that are able to go get their JD from California? Because you could go completely online over in California to be an attorney, and I know a lot of states don't recognize California JD because of the fact that you could do it online. You can do chat or AI to help you pass your school. And what's your thoughts about that?
Well, I think there are two answers to that.
Okay.
One, I will say, let me take the last part of the question first.
Okay.
So you were talking about Chat GPT and AI.
Yeah.
That really is in the law these days. I mean, even at Emory Law School, I know people who, are using AI to really help themselves learn. And there are certain restrictions and limitations on it. We have professors who engage in AI research and how does AI interact with the law. And I've used Chat GPT just to experiment. The caveat I would put on that is, though, Chat GPT is often wrong. Sometimes it'll make up cases. And so that's not a fan of putting all of our stake into this AI thing. I'll also mention, as I recently learned, that AI is pretty bad for the environment because it takes computer servers to run that thing. And so oftentimes those servers are in poor or Black and brown communities and they suck up all the water. So that's something I'm investigating. But that seems to be a bit problematic, to say the least. However, I know people who are experimenting with AI and trying to figure out how it can help, right? Because it does a good job of summarizing, but in terms of giving new information, that's where it gets dangerous. And that's where some of these schools are starting to crack down. And I think they should. California is unique. I haven't investigated probably as much as I should. I don't know if you're maybe alluding to Kim Kardashian and the way that she passed her classes to become a lawyer, but I think that's where you were going. I know California does have a bar exam. And so I think to have your full practicum or the full weight of the law behind you as an attorney in California, I think they like to still see that you can pass their bar exam, which is one of the hardest in the country. Florida's is also difficult. But yeah, I think it's just different. If you go all online, or some states, I think California as well, which is what Kim Kardashian did, is you can go be an apprentice and just study under someone who's an attorney, do that for a few years. That's different than going to law school. We had to grind it through that first year. I was up super late every night, but you also make bonds with your classmates and with your peers by doing that. You get to have that immediate access to your professors during the day and go sit in their office and really work through the problems, work through the questions. And then your second year, they say the first year is the hardest year. The second year, they work you to death. And then the third year, they bore you to death before the bar exam. So I tell people, I'm looking forward to being bored. Go ahead and bore me to death, because it's been a slog for the past 2 years. I think even that second year, when you are super busy, you're taking classes, of course, but that's when most law schools push you outside the law school to do an internship or an externship or to go serve your community before you lock back in that third year. And then most law students take the bar right after they graduate that third year. I think it's very important that you go to an actual school. And I know things looked a little differently during COVID. I was talking to one of my peers the other day, and he actually went through 2 of his law school years online. And I just can't imagine that, because the content is so rich and so in depth. And so for me, I love law school now that I'm past the first year, and I'm looking forward to learning some more this last year. It's really flown by, but I think it's an important experience if you want to become an attorney, and especially if you want to be able to share in the lawyer experience with your peers.
Thank you.
Robert?
Fantastic. Probably talking a lot about basically your work. The idea is that lawyers work very long hours, but what is it that you also like to do, like on the side for fun with the next 7 minutes, I believe we have left?
Yes, I think. Well, I know that I won't take all 7 minutes or 6 minutes to answer this. You asked the key question there. It's kind of a running joke amongst attorneys and law students is it's hard for us to think of hobbies. Well, it's not that hard for me to think of hobbies, because I like to have fun, as I've mentioned throughout this call, as much as possible. So I grew up, I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I grew up playing tennis. I grew up playing basketball, so I still enjoy playing those sports and watching those sports on TV. The NBA Finals just wrapped up, so shout out to the Oklahoma City Thunder, who won the NBA championship. I also, and shout out to Coco Golf as well, a young Black tennis player who's really
Yes.
rising through the ranks. She won the US Open, I believe, a few weeks ago. I think it's important to have hobbies and things you do for fun. So I enjoy watching new Netflix shows. When I have the time, I enjoy reading, specifically biographies. But getting outside is important. I meant to actually start off this conversation by saying, is it hot where all of y'all are? Because it's been hot as you know what down here in Atlanta.
Yes.
And I know it's hot in North Carolina too. So it's been hard to get outside as much as I would like, but I do think it's important that people exercise. So I go to the gym here as much as possible. What else do I do for fun? I just enjoy community. So there are tons of events and tons of opportunities for young people to get engaged here in Atlanta. So I go to some of those. Then, as I've mentioned throughout the call, faith is important to me. Not only is it important, it's fun. So I'm involved a lot with my church down here in Atlanta.
You know, you mentioned something else, hobbies. And what about personality? Because you certainly have a lively, fun personality. And I knew, sometimes we'll have guests on this network, and I said, I think it's going to go okay. I'm going to do my best to, spice things up or make it lively or whatever it is. And there's sometimes that I have to pull things out of a guest or motivate them to be motivated. But I didn't. I knew on the phone when I first talked to you, I said, nope, this is going to be great. This is going to be great because I can hear your voice and your passion over the phone. And let's talk about personality a little bit, because I would think that if you have a lawyer with a personality that's, some lawyers and other professionals, they're like we talked earlier, they're dry, monotone, not too excited about anything. And so to me, that's not a winning formula. And let's talk about your personality and how much you put that into your law and you practicing and or studying or delivering and things like that. Let's talk about personality a little bit and how important is that?
I think it's very important. You can only control your personality to a certain extent, but the way that you carry yourself, the way you interact with others, and again, the way you make people feel is most important. And so when I have clients that I'm talking to, even when it was the students, 10 years younger than I am, I just try to treat them like I would anyone else and make sure that they felt listened to and heard. And again, bond with them. Hey, what do you like to do? Do you play video games? I know a little bit about that. Do you play sports? Do you like, art? Do you dance? Starting again with the things that make us all alike, because we are all very similar, but we all come to those similarities from different places. And that's really what I wish people would understand about this diversity, equity, inclusion movement. It's so necessary because, yes, we have a lot of similarities, but it's really our differences that we bring to the table that make our community so great. And so I always break the word down. Right. I'll get off the soapbox in 2 seconds. Diversity, right? Differences. We're all different. The four of us on this call look differently. We come from different places. We have different backgrounds. We sound differently. Okay. Equity. Right? Having a fair, I believe Brother Hicks used the word fair earlier, shot at succeeding. That doesn't mean we're all going to do the same thing. We're going to all make the same amount of money. We're going to all be the same level of successful, but we all should have an opportunity to do well in life. And then inclusion, right? How would one of y'all feel if you just got kicked off the call and nobody invited you back and nobody ever told you why you got kicked off this call? Who would like that? And so when people say, oh, DEI, it needs to die and all of this, I'm like, so y'all don't believe in differences. You must think everyone looks, sounds, talks, and comes from the same place. You don't believe in equity, so you don't believe in fairness. But I bet if you got 2 donuts and your brother got 3, you would feel some type of way. And you don't believe in inclusion. So you like to be excluded and on the periphery of society, I guess. You want to go live off on your own somewhere, and you never want to interact with anyone. You never want to have a partner. You never want to feel appreciated. You never want to feel loved. You never want to feel respected. You just rather be excluded from this thing we call life. No. And so breaking these things down goes back to personality. How can we all treat others, golden rule, the way we wish to be treated? And at the end of the day, it just comes down to making people feel seen, heard, and appreciated.
That's exactly right. You know, and we talked earlier, you talked earlier today, and we've been talking about this tonight, you know, about the jury. Now, I do a lot of shows. A lot of them involve music, and I have conversations. And I let the artists know before they come on. I said, look, they say, oh, I'm ready for the interview. I said, oh, yeah, yeah. I said, but I don't do interviews. They said, what? I said, I have conversations. Because I wanted us to feel, and I want the audience to feel that we're sitting in the living room and we're just talking, just having a conversation. To me, the word interview, and a lot of ways that hosts go about it, is so structured that, you know, ask a question with no personality and anything like that. And the last thing I want to say is that with these artists, I asked them one question. How do you connect with your audience? And you mentioned something very important earlier about being able to talk to that jury, be able to talk to that judge, be able to talk to in a convincing manner. Would you say that that's the same thing as connecting with your audience?
I would say so. I would say so. And you used a word earlier that I think, or a few seconds ago, that I think is so key when it comes to speaking with other people. And that's the word with, right? I'm going to have a conversation with you. I'm going to talk to you. Two, that implies a hierarchy. I'm the interviewer. You're the interviewee. You know, I'm going to go talk to Greer about this. Whoa, something's wrong. I'm going to go have a conversation with Greer and hear from him. Oh, now that's different. You're including him in the conversation. You're putting yourselves on an equal playing field. So even that word, and I love the way that you tell people, we're going to have a conversation. I'm not going to interview you, because that creates an immediate hierarchy. Yes, I think connection is key. And whether it's with the jury, with the judge, or your client, again, making them feel seen, allowing them to understand that they are a partner in whatever it is. Hey, you're the jury. You're going to help me out here. You're not actually going to help me. You're going to help my client get a fair trial. Hey, judge, Mr. Miss Judge, you're going to help us make sure that we stay orderly and in line with the law, right? And then to the client, hey, you're going to help me. You're going to give me information. I'm going to spit that information out in a convincing and persuasive manner so that we can hopefully win this thing. Right. So the way that we talk about it, the words that we use, and how we draw people to us instead of pushing people away from us, that is really what I'm all about. And I think that's how we build stronger communities.
This has been a fast hour and 2 minutes.
Time flies when you're having fun. You know what they say?
It is. I've had a blast here. Greer, you have to come back. You have to come back. I've enjoyed this. I'm sure I know the panel has. I don't mean to speak for them, but I guess I am right now. And guys, you can jump in for 30 seconds in it and give your comments or anything like that. But you have to come back. And then there's a few other platforms that I have. And one is hosted by, on Saturdays, it's a judge. And she's out of Arkansas. She's had her program on my network for 8 years. I'm sure that will be a great conversation.
That'd be awesome.
And I would love to invite you on that. Absolutely. So if it's okay, I'm going to give her your information if that's okay with you.
That's fine by me.
Absolutely. Tanisha, you got 30 seconds.
I'm just proud of you, and I like to follow you. I'm going to follow you throughout your life to understand, look at your success when you get older, because I know that you're going to be the next president of the United States. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Robert?
Yes. Also, Greer, how can people follow you?
Great question. So
yes,
people
great
can
question.
reach out. People can reach out to me on social media. I'm at my name at Greer Webb, GreerWebb. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. And I'm on Twitter that way. I'm also on LinkedIn. And my LinkedIn username is just Greer A. Webb. So you can find me by searching my name. Feel free to follow me, reach out to me, ask me your questions. I'll try and help. Social media is a powerful tool when used appropriately.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Greer, again, from myself and on behalf of the panel, thank you so much my friend, for coming on.